The Locked On road to the NHL trade deadline continues now. The Dallas Stars have acquired Evgenii Dadonov from the Montreal Canadiens for Denis Gurianov. And we have got this all covered for you. We'd like to welcome on Dane Lewis of Locked On Stars. And Dane, your feelings on this deal, how does this help or hinder the Dallas Stars as they make their playoff push?
Well, I'll say when the trade first went down and even, several hours after, I feel pretty neutral on the trade. I don't think this is a bad deal for the Dallas Stars. And I don't necessarily think it's a great one either. But, you look at the situation, and I think a lot of people knew something like this was coming. Denis Gurianov has been struggling mightily this season. Only 2 goals, 9 points in 43 games played. At one point, he was away from the team and had some family related issues. We don't really know the details on that, but it just has not been an easy year for Gurianov, seemingly on the ice or off the ice. And even though he's been well respected and liked in the Stars locker room, I think people just knew with this being, his contract ended last season and the Stars signed him to a 1-year extension around $3 million. And so that's kind of like hey, go out and show us that you are worth keeping around. And if you are, then we'll work out a new contract next season. It hasn't worked out. And so Gurianov is now off to Montreal. And in return, I think the Stars get a fine player in Evgenii Dadonov. There's a connection with Pete DeBoer. He scored 20 goals in Vegas last season. He's been a 70-point player at one point in his career. But this is also a guy who only has 4 games of playoff experience, hasn't done a ton this season. Granted, he's been on a pretty bad team in the Montreal Canadiens. So maybe this is just a situation where both players need a change of scenery. And best case scenario, both guys are able to find some new life with their new teams and their new cities.
As far as Dadonov is concerned, how do you see him fitting in? What line do you think he'll be on? And how does his style fit in with what the Stars are trying to do?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, and it's something that I think will change over time, just how the Stars are structured at this point. There's a lot of movement around the lineup outside of that top line because the Stars are, one, trying to still find suitable pieces to put around Tyler Seguin on that second line, but also now the team is dealing with some injuries with some bottom 6 forwards like Luke Glendening and Yoel Kiviranta, who have been out for quite some time now. So Dadonov initially, I can maybe see him getting put somewhere maybe on the second line just to see what it's like playing alongside Tyler Seguin. I know that could be a stretch, but I think you don't want to break up that top group of Robertson, Hintz, Pavelski, and then the third line of Ben, Wyatt Johnston, and Ty Dellandrea. They've been pretty good as well. So it's really either line 2 or line 4, and I don't really think you make a move to bring in a guy and then instantly put him on the bottom line with guys that have been coming up and down from the American Hockey League. I just don't think that would be the best use for Dadonov. And I know over his career, he's had some stints on some power play units, been a decent power play, player. So I think that the Stars might try to find a way to get him inserted onto the man advantage because Gurianov was playing that role on the Stars' second power play unit. So I think that the Stars are going to try to plug him in somewhere where he can provide some offensive spark. I know that hasn't really been what he's done a ton of this season with only 4 goals, but again, I think the Stars are just a better overall talented team than Montreal. So maybe he's getting an upgrade playing alongside guys like Seguin, or even if he does, if the Stars decide to break up some of the other lines, maybe he gets to play with Jamie Benn or Wyatt Johnston, Ty Dellandrea, and of course the defensemen like Miro Heiskanen as well. I think he'll find a way to fit in. It may take some time, and I think the nice part is Coach Pete DeBoer knows Evgenii Dadonov and knows what kind of player he is. So I think he'll have the better idea of where to put him and who he would mesh best with.
Yeah, you got to figure they consulted with DeBoer before pulling the trigger on this deal. Trade deadline is now less than a week away. Do you see Dallas making any other moves between now and then?
I think they definitely could. One nice part about this deal that kind of makes it feel low risk, high reward potentially is they actually gained a little bit of cap space with this deal. They got Montreal to retain 50% of Dadonov's $5 million cap hit. So the Stars are now only paying $2.5 million. Again, Gurianov was making around $3 million. So not a ton of money, but the Stars didn't have a ton of cap space to begin with. So every little bit helps. I think that there will be some other move made, whether that's another depth forward like Dadonov. I personally have wanted them to go after Max Domi in Chicago. I think he'd be a great ad for this team, but I could also see them going the defenseman route. At the time of recording this on Sunday evening, we know that guys like Jacob Chikrin are still out there. Shane Gostisbehere, I think, could maybe be on the move. So I think there's a few defensemen that the Stars could have their eyes on as well. I don't necessarily think they're done with the deadline still a few days away, with the cap space they have and just some of the needs that they have throughout the lineup with injuries and things of that nature. I think that they have at least one more move up their sleeve.
Well, we will definitely have to check that out. Be sure to check out Locked On Stars for more on the Dallas Stars' latest edition and what they do between now and the trade deadline. And keep it dialed in to Locked On NHL all along the road to the NHL trade deadline. This is the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.